And I think we need to jump straight in with that game, really. I think with
why
a
not?
packed show alongside that game. So let's start, really. Juventus 4, Inter Milan 3. 5 of 7 goals, I think. Absolute thunder bastards, worldies. They're all going to be in the goal of the season competition. We're going to start with the Juve perspective. And with that, we have a very special guest who's done us the favour of dropping a voice message. So here is Dib Alexa with her take on the Juve victory.
Hi everyone, it's Lex here, also known as Diba Alexa, and here is my take on the Juve vs Inter match from this past weekend. First off, what an incredible game of football. I wish I could have been at the stadium to watch it live, especially as a Juventina. The Derby d'Italia is always the most anticipated match for our fan bases, and that was easily one of my favorite games of the season already. I mean, 19-year-old Adzic scoring his first goal for the first team with a 91st minute winner against our number 1 rivals. Talk about a dream come true. We have to speak about man of the match, Kenan Yildiz. He had a goal and an assist in the game, and he was our most dangerous player on the field by far. As a Juventina, I will acknowledge that there may be some bias, but for me, he is the best player in the Serie A right now. And truly, this season will be his breakout year. My favorite moment from the match has to be that first Lloyd Kelly goal. The build-up was fantastic, and I was honestly so happy for Lloyd Kelly and the fact that he was able to score in such an important match, because I don't think anyone was expecting that or that kind of finish from him. I think that the underrated hero of that game was Bremer. He had 2 assists and an overall solid, consistent performance. He was everywhere. And honestly, we have missed Bremer so much, and the fact that he's come back and has been so solid for us post ACL injury has truly been incredible. Later in the match, when we had the chance to sub on Openda and David in the attack, it was so refreshing to see that we finally had attacking options that we could take off the bench. Although I will say that you could tell we lacked another direct threat on the right side to mirror Yildiz. But I know that once Zagrova and Chico are back, there will be more balance. Finally, I have to acknowledge the work that Igor Tudor has done. He has brought so much passion and fino alla fine spirit back to the team since the first day he arrived. His tactics may not be perfect, but he's truly brought back so many intangibles for the players and for the fans, and he's restored that belief, which I think is the most important.
Well, Adam, I think she covered everything there, really. Some interesting points, but most importantly, an absolutely statement win for Juve. She mentioned the famous phrase, fino alla fine, there, that they had plastered all over the Amazon documentary, but it did really feel like that. The spirit in this team was there, right?
100%. It did feel like this was a team that was well drilled, well versed. They knew what was expected of them, more importantly, on the day. And yeah, there was some really good standout performances across the pitch. But what I would say is that you could tell Tudor's mentality was all about trying to get the better of Inter, and it was all about being more mature in situations, which I felt like they restricted Inter. They didn't really give them much time to do much on terms of the balls, and it needed that kind of brilliance in the respect of the goals that they did concede for them to actually get back in terms of the game itself. So it goes to illustrate actually how well he's got this Juventus team playing. I think the kind of commentary that we gave on the Patreon episode was, would we see Vlahovic play ahead of Jonathan David? And so it transpired. But I think it was that experience factor that really helped. There was a lot of players on that pitch that I think thrived under that pressure. But more importantly, I think one of the points that Lexa talked about was the rise and prominence of Kenan Yildiz. What a game he had, showing us, I suppose, what we expected to happen, but we needed him to show on a more consistent basis. But more importantly, he took the game by the scruff of his neck and he applied himself to the potential that we know he can deliver. And I think the key for Tudor as well as Juventus is to keep him fit, allow him to have that freedom to roam, because I think he will give them the impetus for this season. But more importantly, Rory, I think you can start genuinely kind of believing that maybe Juventus have a chance in the Scudetto race, because obviously in terms of the result it's far too early, but you get a sense that there's a togetherness. Like beforehand, when you talk about Thiago Motta and Allegri, there wasn't necessarily that kind of buy-in straight away, right? Whereas you could sense in that stadium there was so much riding in terms of being together and getting a result, and you could see how much it meant to everyone in that stadium when the full-time whistle was blown. You've got to applaud Juventus. You got to applaud it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they had a game plan that worked perfectly. Obviously, like if you look at the score sheet, they conceded 3 goals. So you're like, oh, they can't all be great. But obviously, all of those goals, bar the corner, all of those goals were like world-class goals that most goalkeepers aren't stopping, right? I think throughout the game, I was really impressed with their defensive structure, how they were able to really frustrate Inter, how they were able to slow them down, basically keep control of the game. We were talking on WhatsApp, and I was like, I do wonder if it's sustainable long term for Juve to play like the away team at home. They very much let Inter have the ball. They were sitting off. They were catching them on the break. Because I think you're right, the Scudetto talk will start increasing now after this. That does come with increased pressure and increased expectations. And I think at some point there may be an expectation for Juve to start being a bit more of the protagonist in games and in big games as well. And I think that might be an adjustment that they have to make at some point. But in this game in itself, they got the game plan absolutely perfect. They really frustrated Inter, and everybody knew their jobs exactly. I thought the defense, like if you look at that back three of Gatti, Bremer, and Kelly, and you compare that to the performance of Bastoni, Acerbi, and Akanji, it was day and night, right? And I think you can really see that how well drilled they are. And they were just able to sit, wait, and then they knew their moments. I think the Yildiz one is a really good point because we know he's been a prospect for a while. He's had flashes of brilliance. He scored some good goals. The key for him now is to, as you said, do this consistently. But I think he's really becoming a main character in this team. Like, the people now are expecting things of him, and he is a person that you keep your eye on. Like, you're coming up, managers are coming up with a specific game plan for how to deal with him now. So I think this is him kind of evolving a little bit. And yeah, in the first half especially, I thought he was absolutely unstoppable. We saw the Inter defense struggle against Udinese, and whenever he ran at them, they looked absolutely petrified. They didn't have the legs in midfield, really. We'll get onto them later, but they didn't have the legs in midfield, really, to track him. And I think he just had their number effectively on speed dial. But let's talk about the goals, because Di Alexa did also talk about the hero. Again, on our Patreon episode, I did kind of stick up for him and say Kelly has had a quietly okay start to the season against Genoa and Parma. I said, this is the test for him. I think he played very well, but I don't think even he expected that opening goal. Like, Adam, the way my jaw dropped when that went in, like, what a finish on his left foot.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that was something that you have to be very disciplined in keeping that effort down as well. Because if you notice, he really tried his best to keep that kind of effort down, because you know, if you kind of fling your foot at it, it can go anywhere. But the way that he managed to control it in the manner, and you can see there was a sense of relief as well in terms of, I think he's had quite a bit of abuse in terms of his time there so far. But I think that meant a lot to him and potentially buys him a bit more time at Juventus, especially with the fan base. I think they're starting to appreciate what he's delivering. But I think the key as well, Rory, in addition to that, is having someone as pivotal as Bremer. These are the games where you can see why they invested so much money into him, why they brought him into this team, because he is the difference between them being able to potentially be that Scudetto favourites versus what they delivered last season. And I know obviously injuries were the reason why he wasn't part of that squad for last season, but you can see how much of a miss he is. He kind of guides that defensive line. You also mentioned obviously Gatti, but he had a reasonable match. But I think Kalulu as well in that kind of right hand side, he kind of is able to play in that centre back role. And this was something we talked about on the Patreon, is we talked about Inter and that lack of creativity potentially playing a part, but it's how formidable that defensive lineup is for the Juventus point of view, and they got it spot on. And even the midfielders in front of them in Locatelli and from Thuram, even, we did kind of question mark maybe Locatelli's role and how much he would have an impact, but actually he shored it up. He made sure that it was ticking and it kept going. In the end, I think we even talked about it on WhatsApp that actually the likes of Mkhitaryan were kind of roaming, but they didn't do much. they didn't actually offer too much from an Inter perspective. So you've got to give credit for the way that they set up. But you're right to also allude to the factor of Igor Tudor. He can't continue to have this kind of same philosophy of sitting back and hoping to counterattack teams. This was one of those games where it all came off, right? In terms of those worldy goals, you're not going to have that opportunity in every game. And I think, like you say, he's going to have to develop this style of football in terms of transitioning it when the expectations are that you have to take on teams. And yeah, it would be a question mark to see how he develops that over time. But I think with one or two more changes in terms of that lineup, because, you know, there's players that the likes of McKennie, we didn't know he was going to be playing in this match. Cop Miners, I think there's still a question mark over him. Those little bits and pieces, when you've got the likes of Louis Openda potentially playing to the potential. We've got Moretti, for example, he speculated as well that he could come back into the terms of this squad. What could he offer as well going forward? So there's a lot of potentials going forward for Juventus, but on the day, so formidable, and they really shut up shop. Really professional job over Inter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I found it really fascinating, the midfield battle with Thuram. I think he's becoming a very, very key player. Obviously, we had both the Thurams in this game kind of take a starring role. I really enjoyed the ref cam. We found a positive from ref cam. The picture of the two Thurams next to each other complaining to the referee, that has got all-time meme template written all over it. There is a positive to Refcam. I did enjoy that. His goal was, I like that he did both his brother's celebrations when his brother refused to celebrate or kind of didn't really celebrate. I thought that was quite petty, just what we want to see from brothers. Really, really enjoyed that. But I was a little bit disappointed by Coop Miners. I'm glad you brought him out. In a game where everyone's scoring Thunder Bastards, this feels like a game that's set up for Coop Miners to run onto a ball late on, like run into the box late on the ball, and they just didn't really, they're still not finding a place for him in this team at all. It does not seem to be clicking. So I think there are question marks there. But overall, a fantastic performance from Juve, able to score 4 goals. I think the fact that there was even though it's a Derby d'Italia, there wasn't a lot of pressure on them. There wasn't it was a chance for them to prove a point. But if they'd have drawn, everyone would have been like, oh, okay, yeah, fine. We expect that, right? So I think they really took the opportunity to prove a point. And I think, they could be in the Scudetto discussion later on in the season. A fantastic performance from them. If we go to the other side, we're going to look at the Nerazzurri perspective. Your friend and mine, Uncle Sharma, is here with his take. I think he's had some time to calm down. Let's check.
Hey, Adam and Rory. It's your boy Uncle Sharma reporting on duty for the Anglo-Italian pod, reacting 2 days later to the Inter Juve Derby d'Italia. And of course, I am still fuming. This pillar right here took a big beating from me after Jan Sommer let in both of those goals from Yildiz and Adzic. And still fuming, but having time to reflect 2 days after the game, I do see some positives. Of course, I think you can, at the moment, I'm counting Inter out of any Scudetto title race at the moment until they prove me otherwise. And I think it's basically what all Inter fans have been fearing all summer. The criticism of Marotta, Oak Tree, Ausilio about investing, but not really investing in the starting 11. There's all these investments for bench players, young players that, as we saw, are not even in the starting 11 or look like they're not, apart from Sucic, none of them are even close to breaking into the starting 11 at the moment. And so all those things came true, and it looks like Marotta and Ausilio are going to have to take this on the chin. More importantly, with Kivu, of course, he has been put in a difficult situation. I don't think most Interisti blame him. He has big cojones to take the job, but ultimately he has 12, 13 games in Serie A. He's just not ready for a team of this level. But we're going to back him. I don't want to sack him right now, but he needs to, I think, make some adjustments. I don't think Inter, with this current 11, with Hakan, Barella, Mkhitaryan in the midfield, can't play with this high press, high line, because we get exposed, like in the Yildiz goal, or like in the Udinese goals. And of course, after that Zoma stinker, Kivu needs to make some big decisions. Zoma looks like he's going down the same path Samir Handanovic was going down in his last 2 seasons at Inter. So Kivu needs not to make the same mistakes as previous coaches did and get Zoma onto the bench ASAP and give the starting spot to Jose Martinez. We don't know whether he is good enough or not, But from what we've seen last season and what he did at Genoa, he deserves a shot for sure. So he needs to make that decision for sure ahead of the Champions League. But it's going to be a long old season for us. Ciao ragazzi, and Forza Inter and Forza Italian, Anglo-Italian pod.
Well, there we go. I think 48 hours has been enough time to calm down. Fairly rational from Sharma, as always, but a difficult afternoon's viewing for Inter. Shall we start with, I think it's been the talking point ever since, we have to start at the back with Jan Sommer. It was a very difficult performance from him. I think we're seeing the hangover of that Champions League final so heavy and all over the pitch now, as the lack of confidence in a lot of these players, in the club, in the chaos. And I think it all was kind of summed up with Sommer. I thought back to the semi-final against Barcelona when he pulled off those incredible saves and he was interviewed on Paramount, and it was, these old goalkeepers, they've still got it, and this guy's really hitting his peak. And just a matter of months later, they're now like, he needs to be gone. And should he be replaced? We've seen Martinez do well. As Sharma said, it might be the time to get him out on the pitch and show that investment, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, it does feel like that. I mean, Jan Sommer at the time was only a stopgap, right? Because he was brought in off the back of the Onana transfer to Man United. Inter thought they'd done a miraculous kind of bit of business because he was unwanted by Bayern Munich at the time. And, he's been a great servant for them. But as you allude to, I think there's been a few probably sloppy kind of decisions from a Jan Sommer perspective, ones that you expect him to do better. And maybe a younger Jan Sommer actually judges the ball or judges the moments a bit better, for example. I think if you allude to the winner, I mean, it's audacious from Adzalic for that absolute hit. But you have to question Sommer's kind of feet for that moment. What was he where was he placed for that? Obviously, there's a few examples, the one from Yildiz, I think it was, where he gets his hand to it as well. And you're thinking, should he be able to palm that or at least kind of let it kind of bounce outside of his palms? There's so many kind of elements that you kind of think maybe a younger goalkeeper is a bit more agile to those moments, maybe able to see those and tip them around the post, for example. So I think there is that question mark, and rightly so. I think what for me is, it wasn't just Sommer's performance though; it was in front of him as well, as you alluded to in the Juventus
he's not helped
section.
by the defence, right? Like we saw, if Onana's name has come up, but when you have a dodgy defence in front of you, the goalkeeper tends to be highlighted a little bit more, right? So I think he's definitely not helped by the defence. I think Akanji has been thrown into this defence that isn't functioning particularly well. We talked again on the Patreon, is this the chance to throw him in? I still think it was a good idea to put him into this game. I think he had some moments where he was calm on the ball, he was passing it from the back, I think he looked composed, but when you're putting him into a unit that definitely isn't working at its full potential, it makes it a little bit more difficult, right? I think the person I was most surprised by how poor he was Bastoni. I think it's the player, it's the game I've probably seen. It's the worst performance I've seen from him, I think, off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, he was. And I think there was a moment in that first half where he's pulling his thigh. And I did message you, I think, whether this is the moment where he actually comes off potentially. So I don't know if he was maybe feeling the effects of that towards the end of the match, because he gives away that stupid kind of free kick on the 80th minute mark that allows Khéphren Thuram to head back the equaliser for Juventus. And that was such a stupid, needless kind of foul to give away at that very moment. So you're thinking to yourself, that really has cost Inter. But, I wasn't particularly a fan with Acerbi's performance. I didn't think he had his strongest game in Nerazzurri's shirt, for example. And then you look across the board. For me, like, I know we had a kind of back and forth on this one, but I thought he allowed his midfielders to go past him on more than one occasion. And I think he was rightfully pulled off the pitch. I think is also maybe a nod towards the fact that he is tired. He has been playing consistently over the last 3 seasons. I can't remember the last time he actually had a break.
He's not.
He's coming back off the international duties as well. So I think that played a part. Also, Martinez, I have no words for what he actually offered on the pitch. I think they were the worries. We kind of highlighted Martinez as well. We said he'd only had one training session anyway. Go on, Rory.
No, but I understand he's captain and he wants to play and he wants to be on the pitch for Derby d'Italia, but you could see that he just wasn't on it. He wasn't sharp. He wasn't up to it. And I think maybe a captain also has to think, okay, I'm not ready for this game. Maybe I can come on later, but it's my decision to let's have someone else start, someone who's going to be a bit sharper, a bit quicker, a bit more with it. And then if we're in trouble, I can come on.
Exactly.
I know it's a huge game. You're asking a lot for a footballer to choose not to play, right? And then maybe if it comes out that Martinez in the Derby d'Italia, they lose 4-3, and before the game he said, I don't want to play, let someone else play, it's a whole different thing, right? Maybe I'm talking out my arse, but I think you could see from the very minute it started, you're like, yeah, he's not on it today. And it was all on Thuram, who got his goal, well, he was gifted his goal. But I also think we're seeing a very, very ineffective Thuram. We saw last season he was nowhere really near where he was the first season he joined. And I think, again, we're seeing a continuation of that. And both the strikers, really, in a game where they scored 3 goals, for the strikers to be basically anonymous, not really in the game, is quite a damning indictment, I think. And this is something that Sharma touched on in his message. I think now is maybe a good time to go on to it. The lack of investment in the first team, right? We're going to get onto Kivu because I want to talk about Kivu as well, and it's not all bad, honestly. But the a lot of the focus now is on the ownership, of course, and the lack of investment in the first team. So when you've got those 2 strikers, because it's easy for me to say, well, don't play Martinez, give him a rest, play someone else. Well, who else do you play, right? Bonnie came on and didn't really do a lot, couldn't really get up to the speed of the game, but he was the only other option, really. So it's fascinating to so quickly see the issues with lack of investment in the first team. Maybe you'd be expecting it to be after the Champions League has started, the legs are getting tired, you're not rotating. Sure. But for it to be game week 3 and quite obvious is quite a damning indictment, I think, right?
Yeah. And I think this was always going to be the transitional season, when people Simone Inzaghi, should I say, decided to leave Inter off the back of that Champions League final. You're like, okay, Inter have to change things up, because I think he accepted to work with the group of players that he had available to him. He never cried for more investment, but he always wanted or craved to have more players added to this team. And I think it's all about getting the balance right. It's one thing when you bring in kind of experienced pros, but you have to have a long-term strategy of how are you going to get that next gen coming through. And I think they've kind of prolonged that course for so many seasons that they felt like they could get away with it. And it's only starting to bite them right now, where you can see some of those performances, for example, the likes of Barella. I mean, the guy needs a rest. But the problem is you haven't got someone of that ability. There's always been question marks about Fratesi, for example, being brought in. He was only really a stopgap, it appears, now when you think about how he's playing in this team. Piotr Zielinski, for example, obviously, he hasn't been blessed with fitness levels when he's come across from Napoli. But again, he's one of those that I think people are expecting the continuation of their kind of clever bits of business when they brought in Mkhitaryan, for example, and Çalhanoğlu, that they expected them to kind of be a contributing factor towards the kind of performance of this squad. I think there's a lot to be said about this is Inter's team that is at the end of its kind of remit, that it will come to an end and some of these players will move on. Like these ones that we see in front of us right now might not be there in the next 2 to 3 seasons. I think you will gradually see a lot more fresher faces.
Well, these things need to be gradual. Because we were in our Calcio Mercato grades episodes, right? We were talking about the fact they needed to youthen the squad, right? They needed to kind of rejuvenate. Massively. But these things need to be done gradually, right? You can't just go, okay, let's get a load of 21-year-olds and just throw them in now. And there needs to be each season kind of bringing these players in. Now, obviously, finances are an issue for ownership, etc. But I think they've gone too far the other way, brought all these players in, but now clearly, as Sharma said, don't really seem to trust them, don't really seem to want to put them on the pitch. Beyond Sucic is the one who's we've seen the most. Again, very promising player, has looked very comfortable when he's come on. I think, but if you're looking at the players who they brought in on the bench who didn't get in, so Andy Diouf is a central midfielder, not touched him. Luis Enrique as well, not seen him. A lot of these players, even Bisek, they still don't fully trust, not really.
Yeah.
So a lot of these players they've brought in, but clearly they're not ready. So they're basically in the same situation as they were before. They've spent loads of money. They've spent money, but they're still relying on the same players they relied on last year. So you've not moved the rope at all. You've just you're staying exactly where you are. And I think as Inter finished the season so badly last year, even in the league, they dropped off so badly. I know it went to the last day, but it kind of felt inevitable that Napoli were going to do it, right? So teams were figuring them out anyway. And now you've not improved that first 11 again. Teams are just, there's not that fear, there's that comfort when they come into town. And I think we're going to see a lot of teams really take them on a lot more and not be as scared playing them. So I think this squad and these players have a big challenge ahead of them. But let's talk about Kivu as well, because I'm glad to hear that the pressure isn't really on him. The fans on his back. They know what he has accepted for whatever reason he has accepted. He loves the club. He wants to be in charge. It's fairly clear he's not ready for the job and that it's too big for him. But I want to say that he made some big calls, and I think they kind of came off. Starting Carlos Augusto ahead of DiMarco, we talked about it on our Patreon episode about, this might be a chance to rest him and take a bit of the spotlight off him. I think that really worked. Carlos Augusto got his assist. I think he was pretty solid. He's always like a 6, 7 out of 10 player. You know what you're going to get with Augusto, right? Love that call. Love that he made that call. Love that it worked. Then the substitutes he brings on, right? So he brings on DiMarco, he gets an assist. Brings on Zielinski, he gets an assist, right? So he made the substitutions at the right time that made an effect on the game, and he was able to read game state and affect results, right? Now, obviously, and in his comments after the game, he's kind of basically said as much, the players didn't do their jobs, right? The players on the pitch haven't done as much as they should have, and that's what's cost them the game. I think I'm relieved that it's been a fairly measured response towards him. Maybe it's because he's a club legend. If it was Gasparini in charge, maybe he doesn't get that much rope. But how did you see it? I think it was quite a calm reaction from the Inter fans towards the manager, at least, when it's such a kind of seismic game and result.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think he definitely has them on board. I think, like you alluded to, he's not necessarily the man to progress them in the long term, because I think they all understand that he's taken on the role in different circumstances. It's just basically the need of the club that they needed someone to take over from Simeone Inzaghi, and whoever took over from Simeone Inzaghi was always going to have a tough task because of what he achieved with that squad as well. But you're also right to allude to, I felt there was a bit of maturity from Chivu in terms of his approach, in terms of who he made those bold calls, as you alluded to as well. I think he could have gone a step even further, personally. We speculated even about Çalhanoğlu, whether he should be playing in this match, and I'm glad he didn't listen to us, because otherwise we wouldn't have had those bangers, right? But equally, potentially, you alluded to the fact that Zielinski had an assist as well to Çalhanoğlu for that second goal, I think it was. Mkhitaryan, for me, wasn't what I expected. Could Peter Sucic come on and be a bit more of a pinnacle kind of aspect in that midfield, providing a bit more steel? Because there was occasions where when Juventus did counterattack, I felt that the midfield was so far up the pitch that actually they were chasing shadows. They weren't anywhere to be seen. And I think someone of his caliber, who we've kind of likened to be a bit of a Brozovic, for example, just adds that extra body in terms of being able to transition the ball a bit more between the defensive line and the attacking line. So I think that's one of the things. Maybe as well, like you said, up top, should have been the option. Should have been the one instead of Martinez. And I think his pace would have been a bit of more of a threat. We talked about that aspect of not being able to maybe push Juventus's defense a bit more. So yeah, I think there's a lot of learnings for Chivu. We will see though, because I think if you look at the next 3 fixtures, they are must-win games now, because thereafter, I think it's Roma that have to play, and maybe Napoli, if I'm not mistaken.
They have, let's look at their games now very quickly. They have Ajax in the Champions League, and they have now they've got Sassuolo at home, Cagliari away, then they've got Slavia Prague, and then Cremonese at home. So they've got games that they should be winning all of them, and then it gets a little bit more difficult. They've got Roma away. So the next few games, they have to be hitting maximum points, really.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that's the most important thing, is that they get those kind of 9 points, as we've alluded to there. Because as I said as well, thereafter the Roma game, you've also got the Napoli head-to-head as well, which is the big game when you're thinking about the Scudetto race that we kind of anticipated it could have been by this season. But it appears that if you get to that point and you don't maximize on the potential points on board, then we're talking about Inter being 6 points behind Napoli in that title race. And then I think maybe kind of either you accept that Shivu is going to see this in the long term, or you kind of have to maybe cut your losses and think about who's going to be available to maybe potentially progress this into the team. And to be honest, there isn't many candidates out there right now that I think could take on this Inter job and progress it both from a European point of view as well as domestic campaign as well. So very big times ahead for Inter and in particular for Shivu.
Yeah, absolutely. And just two final points, really. I suppose, do you agree? I think I agree with Sharma saying that he considers Inter now out of the Scudetto race. It's not really going to be their race to run. I think I agree with him. Do you find yourself agreeing with him?
I think it's very easy to say that based on what we've seen so far. I still think, though, I anticipate that there will be some twists and turns still, that providing, Inter can get themselves into a better shape in the long term, that they could maybe get themselves back into the Scudetto race. But to be brutally honest, I'm feeling that it won't win it anyway this year. And I've always felt that it's going to be something like Napoli to actually defend it and lift the Scudetto trophy again. So for me, I think it's probably too easy to say that they're out of it, but I don't think I anticipated them to be in the running at the end of the season anyway.
And then finally, the most important question, obviously, your favourite goal? Mine is definitely the Hakan chest and volley. That has to be the...
I mean, we were spoilt for choice, but yeah, I think you have to applaud the technique by Çalhanoğlu for the chest from Zielinski's kind of crocs. How would you describe it? But essentially, he just kind of scoops it back into his direction and pathway. But I have to say, I have an appreciation for Kenan Yıldız as well. Effort from distance, and Adzic as well for the audacity as well.
Absolutely. Just that moment for the 19-year-old, incredible moment. When he came on, I was like, who the hell's this guy? Well, I know who he is now. Absolute rocket to win the game. Stuff that dreams are made